new adventure. Was your adventure pleasant today? Come, sit with us by the fire and warm yourself on this cold night. As the flames chase away the chill, would you like to hear the tale of my journey? Very well. Make yourself comfortable, let the warmth embrace you, and listen closely to the story I am about to tell. The Secret of the Silver Shield. The autumn wind swept across the vast plains of Eloria, carrying with it the scent of fallen leaves and a faint memory of war. Once, these rolling fields had been soaked with blood, echoing with the clash of steel and the cries of the fallen. Now, centuries later, the land had grown quiet, save for the rustling grass and the distant calls of crows. Few dared to walk these grounds after nightfall, for the old tale spoke of restless spirits that wandered here, guarding something too powerful to ever fall into mortal hands. In the heart of this forgotten battlefield lay the ruins of an ancient fortress, its towers broken and its walls crumbling under the weight of time. Beneath the rubble, hidden deep within the earth, was said to be an artifact unlike any other, a shield forged of pure silver, gleaming with an unnatural light, even in complete darkness. Legends told that the silver shield could turn aside any weapon, mortal or magical, and that its true power was tied not to defense, but to a secret known only to the one worthy of wielding it. Many had searched for it. All had vanished, their names swallowed by silence. It was into this land that a young knight named Sir Aldren rode, his horse's hooves sinking into the damp soil. Though still in the early years of his knighthood, Aldren bore the weight of a promise he had sworn to his dying father, to seek out the truth behind the silver shield and ensure it did not fall into the wrong hands. His father had spoken of it not as a weapon of glory, but as a burden, a curse disguised as salvation. The young knight carried only a sword, a lantern, and a heart that burned with both determination and unease. As the sun dipped low beyond the horizon, painting the sky in hues of crimson and gold, Aldren set up camp near the ruins. The fortress loomed above him, its jagged silhouette resembling the teeth of some ancient beast. He could feel the air grow colder, heavier, as though the land itself was watching him. When night finally fell, Aldren sat by a small fire, listening to the whispers of the wind that curled around the broken stones. And then, faint but clear, he heard it, a low voice calling his name, carried from within the darkness of the fortress ruins. With his hand gripping the hilt of the sword, Aldren rose and turned toward the sound, his breath clouded in the chill air as he stepped forward, each footfall echoing against the broken path. The fire behind him flickered and died, leaving him in near total darkness. Somewhere deep within those ruins, the secret of the silver shield waited. Whether it would greet him as protector or consume him as it had so many before, Aldren did not yet know. The voice that called Aldren's name seemed to dissolve into the walls of the ruined fortress. It was neither loud nor threatening, but it carried a strange familiarity that sent a shiver down his spine. He pressed forward, the lantern swinging in his hand, its weak glow illuminating broken stones and tangled roots that had long claimed the stronghold. The hall smelled of damp earth and old ash. Moss clung to walls, and shattered shields and rusted swords lay forgotten on the ground, relics of a battle that had ended centuries ago. As Aldren moved deeper into the ruin, he could not shake the sense that he was not alone. The air seemed thicker, the silence sharper, and the shadows alive. At last, he entered what must have once been the fortress's great hall. A grand chamber stretched before him, though its roof had long since collapsed, leaving it open to the cold starlight above. At the center of the room stood a stone altar, cracked but still standing, its surface engraved with sigils Aldren did not recognize. Upon the altar lay a fragment of polished silver, gleaming faintly, untouched by time. Aldren approached slowly, every step echoing in the hollow chamber. His heart raced. Could this fragment be a piece of the legendary shield? His father's words returned to him in a whisper. The shield is not whole, Aldren. It was broken for a reason. He reached out, his gloved fingers brushing the cold silver surface, and the world shifted. The hall dissolved around him, replaced by a battlefield bathed in moonlight. Screams tore through the night. Steel clashed and fire raged. Aldren stumbled back, realizing he stood in the middle of a war not his own. Shadows of knights fought around him, spectral figures locked in eternal combat. and at the heart of the chaos, a warrior clad in black armor raised a silver shield that shone brighter than the moon itself. The warrior turned, and though his face was hidden behind a helm, Aldren felt the man's eyes pierce into him. "You seek the shield." The phantom spoke, his voice the same that had called Aldren's name. "But you do not yet understand its price." The battlefield faded as quickly as it had appeared, leaving Aldren gasping for breath in the ruined hall once more. The fragment on the altar still gleamed faintly, but now it seemed heavier, as though carrying the weight of the vision he had just witnessed. He withdrew his hand, unsettled, his mind racing with questions. Somewhere deeper in the fortress, a sound echoed, a slow, deliberate movement, like armor brushing stone. Aldren was no longer alone. Aldren froze, his hand instinctively tightening around the hilt of his sword. The sound of movement echoed again, slow, dragging, metallic. It was not the echo of his own steps. Something else walked the halls of the ruined fortress. The young knight held his lantern higher, the flame flickering nervously as the shadows shifted and lengthened against the broken walls. From the far end of the chamber, a figure emerged. At first, it seemed no more than a shadow among shadows, but as it drew closer, Aldren saw the outline of armor, ancient, corroded, its plates blackened by fire and time. The helm was cracked, revealing only darkness within. The figure's gait was unsteady, each step grinding with the weight of rusted metal. Yet Aldren could feel the presence of something powerful emanating from it, as if the ruined armor itself still carried the will of the fallen knight who once wore it. The figure stopped at the edge of the altar, its hollow helm turning toward Aldren. No eyes met his, only darkness. Still, a whisper filled the air, carried not by lips but by the ruin itself. "The shield does not belong to the living." Aldren's breath caught in his chest. "Who are you?" he demanded, though his voice trembled. The figure tilted its head, the sound of metal grinding against itself filling the silence. Then, slowly, it raised its gauntlet hand and pointed to the fragment of silver on the altar. The whisper grew louder, echoing against the stones. "To touch it is to be bound. To seek it is to be cursed." For a moment, Aldren's resolve wavered. His father's warning echoed in his mind, mixing with the vision of the battlefield he had just seen. Yet, as fear gnawed at his courage, another thought rose within him. If such a curse truly existed, then it must never fall into the hands of the wicked. Perhaps it was his fate, not to wield a shield, but to guard its secret. The armored specter lowered its hand and began to retreat, fading into the shadows from which it had emerged. But as it vanished, Aldren noticed something gleaming faintly at its feet. A shard of silver, smaller than a fragment on the altar, yet shining just as bright. When the silence returned, Aldren crouched and picked it up. The moment his fingers closed around the shard, a surge of cold raced through his arm, searing his veins with frost. His lantern flickered violently, almost dying, and he staggered back against the altar. The shard pulsed once in his palm, then went still, as though waiting, watching. Aldren's journey had only just begun, and already the silver shield had chosen to test him. The shard lay cold and heavy in Aldren's palm, its glow faint but unwavering, as though the silver itself possessed a heartbeat. He wrapped it carefully in a strip of cloth and tucked it into his satchel, though even through the fabric he could feel its unnatural chill pressing against him. The silence of the hall stretched on, thick and suffocating, broken only by the sound of his own breathing. But Aldren knew the silence was deceptive. He had felt the presence of the armored shade lingering even after it had faded into shadow. Something watched him still, whether friend, foe, or judge, he could not yet tell, stealing his nerves. He turned from the altar and began retracing his steps through the fortress. The lantern's dim glow cast trembling light across the ruined walls, but the path back seemed strangely altered, as though the fortress itself shifted when unobserved. Passages that had been straight now twisted. Broken stairways appeared where none had been before. Aldren realized then that the fortress was not merely abandoned. It was alive, bound by the same curse that clung to the shield. At last, he reached the outer archway, the night air sharp against his face as he stepped back onto the open battlefield. Stars glimmered faintly overhead, and the moonlight washed the ruined plains in silver. For a moment, Aldren felt relief, until he noticed the fire of his camp had been extinguished. The ground around the cold ashes was disturbed, marked by deep prints that circled his belongings. Not the tracks of a man, nor of any beast Aldren knew. Long, clawed impressions sank into the earth, as though some creature of nightmare had prowled around his resting place while he wandered the halls. His horse, tethered nearby, snorted nervously and pulled at its reins. Aldren soothed the animal with a steady hand, though his own heart was pounding. Whoever or whatever had been here was gone for now, but the message was clear. His arrival had not gone unnoticed. Aldren mounted his steed and cast one final glance at the fortress looming in the distance, its broken towers black against the moonlit sky. The silver shard in his satchel pulsed once more, faint but insistent, as though urging him onward. His father's warning weighed heavily on his mind, yet so too did a growing sense of destiny. The shield was no mere legend. Its secret was real, and already it had begun to draw him into its shadow. As dawn threatened on the horizon, Aldren rode away from the battlefield, unaware that unseen eyes followed him through the darkness, eyes that gleamed with hunger for the power he now carried. The first light of dawn spilled over the horizon as Aldren guided his weary horse along the winding road that led away from the battlefield. The silver shard in his satchel had not ceased its faint pulsing throughout the night, as though reminding him with every heartbeat that he now carried a piece of something far greater than himself. He had little sense of where to begin his search for answers, but instinct drew him eastward, toward the walled city of Kaelen, where scholars and merchants traded in both knowledge and rumor. The countryside around him was quiet, too quiet. Villages he passed bore signs of unease. Doors barred shut, windows shuttered, an occasional hurried glance of a farmer who vanished indoors the moment Aldren rode by. Whispers clung to the air like smoke, rumors of dark figures seen at night, of travelers vanishing from the roads, of old places, once abandoned, stirring again with unnatural life. It seemed the curse of the shield reached farther than he had feared. By the time Aldren reached Kaelen's gates, the sun hung low, painting the stone walls gold. The guards, weary and suspicious, eyed him carefully before allowing him entry. Inside, the city buzzed with restless energy. Merchants shouted their wares. Children darted through narrow streets. And yet beneath it all lingered a current of unease. People spoke in hushed voices, casting wary looks over their shoulders, as though expecting shadows to rise from every alley. Aldren sought out an old friend of his father, Master Aldren, a scholar who had once served as a royal archivist. He found a man in a cluttered chamber above a bookshop, surrounded by scrolls and relics of ages long past. Aldren, bent with age but sharp-eyed, greeted him with cautious warmth. "You bear his look," the scholar murmured, studying Aldren with a mixture of sorrow and recognition. "Your father came to me once, years ago, with the same questions you now carry in your eyes. I warned him, as I will warn you. The silver shield is no gift. It is a key." Aldren's breath caught. A key? To what? Aldren's gaze darkened as he drew a brittle parchment from a shelf, unrolling it across the table. The faded ink depicted a circle of runes surrounding a figure holding a shining shield. The shield was forged not only to protect, but to bind. It seals away something that should never be loosed upon this world. That is its true purpose and its curse. For whoever holds its pieces is drawn closer to what lies behind the seal. Before Aldren could speak, a sudden commotion rose in the street below. Shouts, screams, and the sharp clang of steel. He and Aldren rushed to the window just in time to see cloaked figures moving through the crowd, their weapons flashing as they cut down anyone in their path. At their center, one figure raised a hand, and Aldren's shard pulsed violently in answer, glowing so bright it nearly burned through the satchel. Aldren's face paled. "They've come for it. You must flee, Aldren. Now!" Aldren gritted his teeth, drawing his sword. He had known the shield's secret would draw enemies, but he had not expected them so soon. As the cloaked figures turned their eyes toward the scholar's chamber, Aldren realized there was no more hiding. The battle for the silver shield had already begun. The scholar's chamber shook as the first of the cloaked figures slammed against the door, their blades scraping against the wood. Aldren stepped forward, planting himself between the entrance and Master Aldren. His sword gleamed in the lantern light, Steady in his grip, despite the storm of fear that threatened to consume him, the door burst open, splinters flying across the room. 3 figures poured in, their faces hidden beneath black hoods. They moved with uncanny precision, silent and swift, as though guided by a single will. Their weapons were unlike any Aldren had seen. Curved blades etched with runes that shimmered faintly, pulsing in rhythm with the shard in his satchel. Aldren struck first. His sword met one of the curved blades, a shower of sparks, the impact sending a vibration up his arm. The assassin staggered back, but another lunged forward, slashing low. Aldren twisted aside just in time, his blade carving a shallow cut across the attacker's cloak. No cry of pain followed, only a hollow hiss, like wind escaping a tomb. Behind him, Master Aldren fumbled through stacks of parchment, muttering incantations under his breath. With a sudden shout, he hurled a small vial at the ground, shattering into a burst of blinding light. The room filled with smoke, and the attackers recoiled, their movements faltering. "Go!" Aldren urged, his voice cracking with urgency. "Take the shard and run." Aldren hesitated, unwilling to abandon the old man, but the assassins were already regaining their footing. One of them fixed his unseeing gaze directly on him, and Aldren felt the shard in his satchel burn like fire. The thing was calling to them, drawing them. He swung his blade in a wide arc, forcing the cloaked figures back, then dashed toward the stairway. The assassins pursued, their steps unnaturally silent despite the chaos they left in their wake. Aldren raced down the narrow staircase, his armor clanging against the walls, and burst into the streets of Caerwyn. The city was chaos. Civilians screamed and scattered, guards clashed with more of the cloaked figures, and the cobblestones ran slick with blood. Above it all, Aldren caught a glimpse of a single tall figure standing at the far end of the street. Unlike the others, this one wore no hood. His face was pale, sharp, and expressionless, his eyes like polished obsidian. In his hand gleamed a half-circle of silver, the twin of the shard Aldren carried. The man raised his piece of the shield high, and at once Aldren's shard answered, glowing brighter, searing his skin through the satchel. A voice pressed into his mind, cold and commanding, "Return it, or be unmade." Aldren clenched his teeth, gripping his sword tighter. His father's warning echoed in his heart, and yet he knew there was no turning back now. The silver shield was already binding his fate to forces older and darker than he had ever imagined. The pale figure did not advance. He stood at the end of the blood-soaked street, like a sentinel, his silver fragment raised high, the glow spilling across the chaos like moonlight made solid. The assassins closed around Aldren, herding him toward their master, their movements eerily synchronized. Each step they took seemed to echo the beat of the shard in Aldren's satchel, as though both hunter and prey were bound to the same rhythm. Aldren's horse whinnied frantically where he had tethered it near the market square. If he could reach it, there might still be a chance of escape. But the assassins pressed tighter, blades slashing in arcs of shimmering light. Aldren parried, ducked, and countered, his sword ablur as sparks lit the smoky air. He fought with the desperation of a man not only defending his life, but guarding something greater. Yet for every enemy he struck, another seemed to rise in its place. The pale figure's voice carried across the chaos, cold and unyielding. "Do you feel it, knight? The shard has chosen you, but it does not love you. It will consume you, as it did all before." Aldren gritted his teeth and fought his way toward the square, where firelight flickered from overturned carts and shattered lanterns. A fallen guard's shield lay at his feet, ordinary battered steel, but still serviceable. Snatching it up, he raised it just in time to block a downward strike that would have split his helm in two. The impact rattled his bones, but he held his ground. As the clash raged, something stirred within Aldren's satchel. The shard pulsed violently, and for an instant, a thin veil of silver light spread across the battered shield on his arm. The assassin's next strike rebounded with a shriek of sparks, sending the cloaked figure sprawling. Aldren stared in disbelief. The shard's power had flowed into the common shield, protecting him as though it were the legendary relic itself. The pale man's expression shifted, just slightly, but enough to reveal surprise. He lowered his silver fragment and whispered something Aldren could not hear. The assassins faltered, their movements breaking rhythm, and then withdrew into the smoke as swiftly as they had come. In moments, the street was empty save for groans of the wounded and the distant cries of alarm. Aldren stood panting, sword in one hand, shield in the other. The shards glowed, dimming once more into silence. The pale figure remained at the end of the street for a moment longer, his obsidian eyes fixed on Aldren. Then, without a word, he turned and vanished into the night, his presence receding like a shadow melting into deeper darkness. Master Aldren stumbled into the square, clutching a bleeding wound at his side, but alive. His face was pale, his voice trembling as he spoke. They will not stop now. You have revealed the shard's power, and he, the one who leads them, knows you. Aldren swallowed hard, sheathing his sword. He looked down at the faintly glowing satchel and felt the weight of the future pressing upon him. For the first time, he wondered not only whether he could protect the Silver Shield's secret, but whether he could protect himself from it. Aldren helped Master Aldren back into the ruined bookshop, its windows shattered and shelves overturned into chaos. The old scholar sank into a chair, clutching his wound as Aldren bound it with strips torn from his own cloak. Aldren grimaced but waved off the pain, his sharp eyes never leaving the satchel that held the shard. You saw him, didn't you? The scholar whispered. The pale one. Aldren nodded, his jaw tightening. He carried another fragment. He knew me, knew the shard was in my possession. Who is he? Aldren leaned back, his voice low and hoarse. His name has been lost to most, but in the old text, he is called Kaelen the Hollow, once a knight of the realm, sworn to defend the crown. But he was seduced by the shield's power, and when it was broken, he took one of its pieces for himself. Centuries have passed since then, yet he walks the earth still, neither living nor dead, bound to the shard, as you now are. The word struck Aldren like a hammer blow. Bound. The shard in his satchel seemed to grow heavier, as if affirming the truth of the scholar's warning. Aldren continued, his voice grim. Kaelen seeks to gather the fragments. If he restores the shield, the seal it guards will be undone. What lies behind that seal, no man should ever face. Aldren looked down at the battered shield still strapped to his arm, remembering the burst of silver light that had saved his life. A part of him longed to believe he could wield the power of the shard for good, to protect, not destroy. His father's warning, and Aldren's words gnawed at his heart. Power was never without cost. From outside, the cries of the city guards drifted through the broken window, calling for order and aid. Kaelen would recover, but Aldren knew the attack had been only the beginning. Kaelen had tested him, measured him, and then retreated. Their next meeting would not end so easily. We cannot stay here, Aldren said, struggling to his feet. There are others, keepers of knowledge older than mine, who may know how to destroy the shards, or at least keep them from Kaelen's grasp. But the journey will not be safe. His shadows will follow. Aldren tightened his grip on his sword, his path clear though the weight of it pressed heavily on his soul. Then we leave at first light, he said firmly. If Kaelen seeks the shield, we cannot allow him to find a rest. Aldren's weary eyes met his, filled with both fear and hope. You're your father's son, Aldren. Let us pray that will be enough. Outside, the smoke of battle drifted into the night sky, and in the distance, unseen, Kaelen the Hollow watched from the shadows. The silver fragment in his hand pulsed once, answering the call of the shard Aldren carried. His voice was little more than a whisper carried by the wind. Soon, the morning sun rose weakly over Kaelen, its pale light struggling to pierce the haze of smoke that still lingered above the city. Aldren and Master Aldren rode quietly through the eastern gate, leaving behind the scarred streets and wary eyes of people who had witnessed a glimpse of darkness they could not comprehend. The guards did not question their departure. Word of the night's attack had spread quickly, and none wished to draw the attention of the cloaked assassins again. The road stretched ahead through rolling hills and quiet woodlands, but the land bore strange marks. Crops withered in patches, as though touched by blight, and the air itself seemed colder, even beneath the sun. Aldren explained that the shards radiated corruption when brought together, or even when awakened by the presence of their bearer. Kaelen's pursuit had begun to poison the very earth. We must reach the monastery of Vera, Aldren said as they rode. Its archives are older than the realm itself, and its keepers know the lore of relics long forgotten. If any place holds answers, it is there. Aldren listened in silence, though unease gnawed at him. The shard in his satchel had remained quiet since the battle, but he could feel it pulsing faintly whenever his thoughts drifted toward the pale night. Bound! That was the word Aldren had used. Already, Aldren felt as though invisible threads tied his fate to the relic. By midday, they came upon the remnants of a village. Blackened timbers jutted like broken bones from the earth, and the air smelled of smoke and char. Not a single soul stirred among the ruins. Aldren dismounted, his boots crunching on ash as he walked the empty street. The silence was unnatural. No bird sang. No animal scurried. Only stillness. Then he saw them, marks carved into the walls of the burned houses. Symbols like the ones he had glimpsed in the fortress where he found the shard. Strange, twisting runes that seemed to writhe if he stared too long. He reached out a hand but stopped short, remembering the hollow hiss of the assassin's blades. Aldren studied the marks with a grim face. Kaelen's followers passed here. They left no survivors. Aldren's stomach tightened. He clenched his fist, fury and helplessness burning together in his chest. Every step closer to the truth left destruction in its wake, and he wondered if his very quest was drawing doom upon the innocent. Before he could voice his thoughts, a sound stirred in the distance. The faint clang of steel, desperate shouts, and the guttural cries of inhuman throats. Aldren's head snapped toward the eastern fields, where smoke rose anew. Without hesitation, he drew his sword. "Stay behind me," he told Aldren, though the old scholar's protest was already on his lips. Aldren sprinted across the field, the ash kicking up behind him, and as he crested the hill, his heart froze. Below, a band of Kaelen's cloaked assassins closed on a lone traveler, a young woman clad in chain and leather, wielding a spear with fierce determination. She fought like a cornered wolf, striking and parrying with skill, but the assassins pressed her relentlessly, their numbers too great. Without thinking, Aldren charged down the slope, his blade raised, the shard in his satchel pulsing violently as though it too hungered for the fight. Aldren's war cry split the air as he crashed into the assassin's ranks. His blade struck with such force that the first cloaked figure fell before it had time to react, its body collapsing in a wisp of smoke and shadow rather than blood and flesh. The young woman's eyes widened at the sudden arrival of an ally, but she wasted no breath on questions. She pivoted, her spear flashing in quick, precise arcs that forced another assassin back. Together they fought, the clash of steel ringing out across the empty fields. Aldren's heart pounded, his arms aching as each strike from the assassin's rune-etched blades tested his strength. Yet the shard in his satchel pulsed in rhythm with his movements, its power flickering faintly across his battered shield whenever a blow threatened to overwhelm him. Twice, the strange light turned aside strikes that should have cut deep. The young woman fought with equal ferocity, her spear thrusts aimed with deadly accuracy. But even her skill could not keep the tide at bay forever. An assassin slipped behind her, blade raised for a killing stroke, only for Aldren to intercept, his sword cutting through the attacker's weapon in a burst of sparks. She met his eyes briefly, breathless, and nodded. "I owe you my life, stranger." "No time for debts," Aldren replied, turned to face the next wave. The assassins pressed harder, their movements growing frenzied. It was as if the shard's presence was driving them into desperation. Then, with a shriek that pierced the air, they withdrew all at once, vanishing into smoke as swiftly as they had come. Silence fell over the battlefield, broken only by the heavy breathing of the two warriors. The woman planted the butt of her spear into the earth, leaning on it as she caught her breath. "They will return," she said grimly. "They always do." Aldren lowered his blade but did not sheath it, wary of the shifting shadows. "You know them?" She gave a bitter smile. "Enough to hate them. My name is Kaelen of Hollow. I've hunted those things since they destroyed my home. You fight them well. Too well to be here by chance. Why are you on this road?" Aldren hesitated, glancing at Aldren, who had just arrived on the hilltop, pale and weary from a climb. The old scholar shook his head, silently urging caution. But Aldren sensed something in Kaelen, a fierce will and a grief that mirrored his own. He spoke quietly. "They seek something I carry, a fragment of the silver shield. Her eyes sharpen at once, all fatigue vanishing. Then our paths are bound, for wherever the shield's shadow falls, Kaelen follows. At the mention of that name, Aldren felt the shard stir in his satchel, a faint echo of the pale knight's presence. He clenched his fist and met Liona's gaze. Then perhaps it is time I stop running from shadows. If you would stand with us, we could use your spear. Liona's answering smile was grim, but resolute. Then let us hunt the hunters. The three turned toward the road once more, the ruins of the village smoldering behind them. The shard pulsed faintly as if in approval or warning, as they set out toward the distant monastery, unaware that Kaelen the Hollow already knew of their alliance, and was weaving his next move. The night fell quickly over the scorched lands, cloaking the world in silence broken only by the whisper wind through the burned fields. Aldren, Liona, and Aldren made camp in the hollow of a ruined barn, its charred beams groaning under the weight of years. The air was heavy with the smell of ash, yet the warmth of a small fire offered them a fragile sense of refuge. Liona sat sharpening her spear, her movements sharp and methodical. Sparks hissed in the firelight as her voice finally cut through the silence. You spoke of the shard, a fragment of the silver shield itself. She looked up at Aldren, her eyes glinting with suspicion as much as curiosity. I thought it destroyed generations ago. How do you come to carry a piece of it? Aldren shifted uncomfortably, adjusting his robes as he stirred the fire with a broken beam. The shield was never wholly lost. Scattered, yes, shattered into pieces to prevent its misuse. But time buries truths as surely as it buries bones. He glanced at Aldren, his lined face betraying unease. The boy stumbled upon one of the fragments, though I fear it was not chance that guided his hand. Liona's gaze lingered on Aldren. Fragments or not, the assassins we fought tonight were not ordinary men. They were shadows of Kaelen's will. That means he already senses the shard's return. Aldren frowned, his hand brushing the satchel at his side. You both speak of Kaelen as though he were a storm everyone should know to fear. Yet I know him only as a name whispered in battlefields. The fire cracked. Liona's face hardened, her tone sharp. Kaelen the Hollow was once a knight of the realm, sworn to defend the innocent, but he forsook his vows when he sought the shield's power. When it shattered, so did he. Now he wears no flesh, only armor and emptiness, a vessel of hunger that spreads death wherever he rides. Villages like mine, she paused, her jaw tightening. They do not burn themselves. Silence followed. Heavy as iron, Aldren stared into the flames, feeling the weight of her words settle on his shoulders. The shard pulsed faintly inside his satchel, as though it too remembered Kaelen's name. Finally, Aldren spoke, his voice low and grave. There's a reason we travel to the monastery of Drosten. The monks there preserve fragments of the old wisdom. If the shield is to be reforged or destroyed, they may hold the key, but every step toward them draws Kaelen nearer. Liona's spear rasped once more against the whetstone before she set it down. Then we must be faster than his shadow. Aldren looked up, meeting her gaze. For the first time since he left his village, he felt a thread of resolve stronger than his fear. Then let us make haste. If Kaelen comes, I would rather face him with purpose than wait to be hunted like prey. Liona's expression softened slightly, a flicker of respect in her eyes, spoken like one who may yet earn a warrior's name. Outside, the wind shifted. Unseen by the trio, beyond the blackened horizon, a rider cloaked in smoke halted a steed upon a ridge. The hollow helm turned toward the faint glow of their fire in the ruins. Kaelen's voice whispered into the night. Cold and hollow. They gather. Good. Let them run their road of ashes. In the end, all paths returned to me. The rider spurred his mount forward, and the shadows followed. The morning sun broke weakly through a veil of smoke and mist as Aldren, Liona, and Aldren pressed onward along the winding road to the mountains. Each step carried them closer to the monastery of Drosten, though none of them spoke of the tension gnawing at their hearts. The path grew narrower as it rose, flanked by jagged cliffs and skeletal trees that seemed to reach for them like withered hands. Liona led the way, her eyes constantly scanning the rocks above. The Drosten monks chose their sanctuary well, she murmured. Hard to reach. Harder still to leave if enemies close in. Aldren nodded, though his breath came shallow from climb. Isolation breeds preservation. Their halls are said to keep knowledge untainted by centuries of war. If any truth remains about the shield's forging, it will be here. Aldren's grip tightened on his satchel. The shard pulsed faintly, as though eager for what lay ahead, or wary. He glanced behind him more than once, certain he felt the weight of unseen eyes on their backs. By mid-morning, they crested a ridge, and the monastery finally came into view. It stood carved into the side of the mountain itself, its stone walls weathered but unbroken, its high gates adorned with ancient runes that shimmered faintly even in daylight. Bells tolled softly from within, their echo haunting in the cold air. Relief flickered across Aldren's weary face. We've made it. The monks will offer sanctuary. But as they drew nearer, Lioness slowed, her spear lowering in suspicion. The gate stood ajar. No guards were posted. No robed figures appeared to greet them. Only the wind whispered through the open passage. Aldren felt his stomach tighten. Something's wrong. They entered cautiously. Inside, the vast courtyard was eerily silent. Statues of ancient heroes stood in solemn rows, their faces worn by centuries. But every door around the square hung open, and the scent of ash lingered faintly in the air. Then they found the first body. A monk lay sprawled across the steps of a shrine, his robe singed and torn, his face frozen in terror. Aldren felt his knees beside him, whispering a prayer, his voice breaking. No, not here. Not them. Lioness's knuckles whitened around her spear. Kaelen has been here. We are too late. The silence was broken by a sound from deeper within the halls. Faint, deliberate footsteps echoing across the stones. Aldren drew his sword, every muscle tensing. From the shadows beneath the archway, figures began to emerge. Cloaked assassins, their blades gleaming with runes of fire and smoke. And behind them, a taller figure followed. His armor was pale as bone, his helm hollow, his presence suffocating. The air seemed to shiver around him as he stepped into the light. Kaelen the Hollow had arrived. His voice, like wind through a tomb, carried across the courtyard. The shard has found its bearer. At last, the shield begins to stir. His hollow gaze fixed on Aldren, unflinching. Come forward, boy. Yield what you hold, and I may grant you a swift end. Aldren's throat tightened, but his grip on his sword did not falter. He felt the shard pulse in defiance, as though urging him to stand. Lioness stepped beside him, spear leveled, while Aldren rose slowly to his feet, his sorrow hardening into resolve. No, Aldren said, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at him. If you want it, you'll have to take it. Kaelen's hollow helm tilted ever so slightly, as if in amusement. Then he raised his gauntlet hand, and the assassin surged forward like a tide of shadow and steel. The courtyard of Drosten erupted in battle. The clash was immediate, thunderous. Shadows darted between the monastery's pillars, their rune blades glinting red as they closed in. Aldren swung his sword to meet the first, sparks bursting where steel struck steel. His shield shuddered under the impact of another blow, yet the shard's pulse rippled across its surface, turning what might have been a killing strike into a glancing one. Lioness fought at his side with the ferocity of a storm. Her spear thrust through the chest of one assassin, only for the figure to collapse into ash. She spun, driving the weapon into another's throat, her movements graceful yet fueled by rage. Stay close, Aldren, she shouted above the din. They want to separate us. Aldren, though no warrior, raised a staff. Ancient words spilled from his lips, and faint arcs of light leapt from the runes etched into the courtyard stones. A shimmering barrier flared to life, slowing the assassin's advance. But the old scholar staggered as the effort drained him, sweat streaming down his brow. From the far side of the courtyard, Kaelen remained still, watching with the cold patience of predator. His presence pressed on him like a weight, his hollow helm never turning from Aldren. Each time the young warrior struck, he felt that gaze pierce deeper, as if Kaelen were measuring his strength, waiting for a precise moment to move. Aldren gritted his teeth and pressed forward. He cut down one assassin, then another, his blade flashing in the faint light of the monastery's broken torches. But for each he felled, two more took its place. The courtyard became a storm of motion, a battle fought in the flicker of fire and shadow. Suddenly, one of the assassins slipped past Lyanna's guard and lunged straight for Aldren. The old man cried out, stumbling back, but Aldren leapt between them, his shield raised. The assassin's blade slammed into silver fragments glow, shattering into dust as if struck by divine fire. For an instant, the shard's light flared brilliantly, casting long shadows across the courtyard. That moment broke the tide. The assassins recoiled, hissing like creatures burned by the sun. Lyanna seized a chance, driving her spear to their front line, scattering them toward the edges of the square. But Kaelen finally stirred. He stepped forward, each motion deliberate, his pale armor untouched by time. The air grew colder with every step. "Impressive," he intoned, his hollow voice echoing in their chests. "The shard awakens to you, but the shield does not choose its bearer. You are merely its vessel until I reclaim it." Aldren raised his sword, his heart hammering. The shard pulsed in time with his breath, urging him to stand his ground. Yet some part of him knew the truth. Against Kaelen, he was not ready. Not yet. Aldren's voice cut through the fear. "The catacombs," he shouted, pointing toward an archway half hidden behind the shrine. "There are passages below, ancient and secret. They may lead us to safety." Lyanna met Aldren's eyes. "If we stay, we die." Kaelen's gauntlet lifted, and a wave of shadows surged toward them. Aldren made his choice. "To the catacombs, move." The three of them broke for the archway as Kaelen's assassins regrouped and the Hollow Knight advanced, his steps echoing like war drums in the courtyard of the dead. The archway yawned like a mouth into darkness as Aldren, Lyanna, and Aldren hurled themselves inside. The air shifted instantly, the cold weight of stone pressing down as they stumbled through a stairwell chiseled deep into the mountain. Behind them, the roar of shadow filled the courtyard, Kaelen's forces surging to follow. Their footsteps pounded on the worn steps, echoing like drum beats of pursuit. Torches burned dimly along the walls, sputtering as though the very air resisted flame. The deeper they went, the more the monastery's silence wrapped around them. Lyanna's voice was tight, though steady. These catacombs weren't meant for escape. They were meant for hiding what the monks fear to lose. "Be wary. This place will test us." Aldren nodded, his breath ragged. The Order of Drosten was older than kingdoms. They carved wards into these walls, seals to guard relics, and truths better left buried. We may be safe from Kaelen's reach for a time, but the catacombs will not welcome us freely. The stairwell ended in a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow. Ancient statues lined the walls, their stone faces eroded but their stances defiant, each clutching a weapon or shield. At the chamber's heart stood an altar of black marble, carved with runes that pulsed faintly in rhythm with the shard in Aldren's satchel. The shard grew warm against his side, its glow spilling faintly through the leather. Drawn by it, Aldren stepped closer to the altar. His hand hovered above the cold stone, as if something unseen compelled him. Lyanna caught his arm. "Careful. Whatever power rests here may not be meant for us." But before Aldren could answer, a low rumble shook the chamber. The statue's eyes flickered with pale light. Dust rained from the ceiling as cracks spread across the walls. Then, with a sound like stone grinding on stone, two of the statues stepped down from their pedestals, their colossal forms awakening after centuries of silence. Guardians. Aldren staggered back in awe and dread. By the ancients, the protectors of Drosten, they stir to test those who trespass. The first guardian raised its stone blade, its strike crashing into the floor where Aldren had stood a heartbeat before. The ground split under the blow, shards of rock flying. The second swept its shield forward with enough force to hurl Lyanna against the altar. She rolled and sprang back up, spear flashing, but the weapon only scraped harmlessly across stone skin. Aldren's breath came fast, his sword feeling small in his grip. The shard pulsed harder now, almost painfully, as though urging him to act. But how could he fight titans carved from the mountain itself? Not all trials are won with steel. Aldren cried, fumbling through his satchel for ancient scrolls. These guardians answer only to one who proves worthy of the shield's legacy. "Aldren, you must find a way to command the shard, or we all perish here." The guardians advanced, their steps shaking the chamber like thunder. Shadows flickered at the stairwell above as Kaelen's assassins drew nearer. their whispers echoing down the stone corridors. Hemmed in between the wrath of the Guardians and the pursuit of Kaelen, Aldren felt the weight of fate pressing on him. The shard burned like a brand against his chest, demanding an answer. He had to choose. Stand and fight against stone, or trust the shard's call and risk awakening whatever power slumbered in the altar before him. The Guardians loomed, their colossal shadows stretching across the chamber like storm clouds. Dust cascaded from the ceiling with every thunderous step. Aldren's sword trembled in his grip, not from weakness, but from a knowledge that steel alone could not win this fight. The shard pulsed harder and harder, the heat searing through the satchel until it felt alive, demanding release. Aldren cried, his voice cracking with desperation. The altar placed the shard upon it. The monks forged these wards to recognize the shield's essence. It is the only way. Lina deflected a strike with her spear, rolling aside as the Guardian's stone blade crashed down, shattering the floor where she had stood. She rose, her eyes blazing, her voice sharp. "Do it, boy, or we die here." Hard hammering, Aldren tore open the satchel and seized the shard. It burned in his hand, its silver glow brightening as though it had waited centuries for this moment. He sprinted toward the black altar, weaving past the Guardian strikes that shook the chamber like thunder. With a cry that was equal parts fear and resolve, he slammed the shard onto the rune's surface. The chamber erupted in light. The runes blazed, filling the darkness with silver fire. The Guardians froze mid-strike, their glowing eyes dimming as if caught in a spell older than time. The shard melted into the altar's surface, and from that union, a wave of energy rippled outward. For a heartbeat, Aldren saw visions flash before his eyes. A shining shield whole and unbroken, wielded by a knight of legend who stood against Kaelen in ages past. Then the vision shattered into sparks, leaving only fragments of understanding. When the light faded, the Guardians no longer moved. They sank slowly back to their pedestals, their forms hardening once more into cold stone. Silence followed, deep and absolute, broken only by Aldren's ragged breathing. Idrin's hands shook as he lowered his staff. "You've awakened the memory of the shield," he whispered. "It knows you. You are not merely its vessel. You are its chosen." Lina's gaze lingered on Aldren, fierce and unreadable. Chosen or cursed, you carry a weight that will break you if you falter. But before Aldren could reply, the silence was broken. From the stairwell above, a hollow voice rolled into the chamber, heavy with disdain and hunger. "You tamper with powers you cannot hope to master." Kaelen the Hollow descended, his pale armor glinting in the dim silver light. Shadows poured down around him, assassins whispering like a tide, his hollow helm fixed upon the altar, and the faint glow of the shard still fused to it. "At last," he intoned, raising his gauntlet hand. "The shield remembers, and through you, boy, it shall be mine again." The catacombs trembled, as if the mountain itself recoiled from his presence. Aldren lifted his sword, the silver fire still flickering faintly across its edge, and set his stance. Lina leveled her spear beside him. Idrin, though weary, steadied his staff with both hands. They had faced assassins. They had faced guardians. But now, within the heart of the monastery, they stood face to face with Kaelen the Hollow himself, and there would be no turning back. The air in the catacombs thickened with a suffocating weight as Kaelen descended into the chamber. His pale armor shimmered faintly, drinking in the silver glow that still lingered from the altar. The assassins fanned out his back, silent and unrelenting, but it was Kaelen himself who commanded the space. His presence was not that of a man. It was a gravity of a void, an emptiness that devoured courage. Aldren's fingers tightened around his sword hilt. The shard's energy still pulsed faintly within the steel, but it felt fragile, uncertain, as though it barely recognized him. His chest burned with fear, yet beneath it beat a thread of resolve. He would not yield. Kaelen's hollow helm tilted, and though no face lay beneath, Aldren felt the weight of a gaze that stripped him bare. "You hold a fragment of what was mine," Kaelen said, his voice echoing like iron across stone. "You dare wake its memory. Think it will heed you? Child, you are not chosen, you are consumed." The words struck like hammer blows, but Aldren raised his shield. "If the shield remembers you, it remembers why it was broken. You will not have it back. Lyanna stepped forward, spear leveled, her voice sharp as steel. Enough words. He bleeds like any other, hollow or not. Aldren's hand trembled against his staff, but his voice carried strength. No, Lyanna! Kaelen cannot be felled by brute force. His bond with the shards makes him more than flesh. Aldren must hold him. The shard will show its truth only under trial. Kaelen's gauntlet lifted. Shadows poured from his hand, swirling into the shapes of armored wraiths that leapt toward the trio. The assassins struck in unison, blades hissing against steel and stone. Aldren met the first head-on, his sword clashing with unnatural strength that rattled his bones. Lyanna spun to the next, her spear flashing like lightning, scattering the shadows into ash. Aldren cried out words of power, runes igniting on the chamber floor, buying them fleeting moments of light. But then Kaelen moved. He stepped into fray with slow, deliberate power, and with a single sweep of his great sword, he shattered Aldren's barrier as if it were glass. The old scholar staggered, blood at his lips, but forced himself upright, leaning on his staff. Aldren charged, his shield raised. Kaelen's blade struck, the impact reverberating through the chamber like a thunderclap. The force hurled Aldren to his knees, his arms screaming with pain as the shard's glow barely held back the killing blow. Kaelen loomed over him, his hollow helm staring down into Aldren's eyes. You feel it, don't you? The shard burns because it knows you are unworthy. It longs to return to me. The shard pulsed violently, sending a shockwave through Aldren's arm. For a heartbeat, despair clawed at him. But then he heard Lyanna's cry as she drove her spear at Kaelen's flank, forcing the Hollow Knight to turn. He heard Aldren's ragged breath, chanting desperately to weave another spell. He was not alone. With a roar, Aldren rose, raising both sword and shield. The shard flared brighter than before, its light lashing against Kaelen's armor. The Hollow Knight staggered, not wounded, but slowed, his steps dragging as though the light burned against his very essence. For the first time, Kaelen's voice shifted, no longer calm but edged with hunger. Yes, I see now. The shield remembers you. That will make breaking you all the sweeter. He raised his great sword again, the shadows roaring like a storm around him. The chamber shook as steel and silver light collided, their struggle echoing through the catacombs like the judgment of gods. Steel rang like thunder in the catacombs as Aldren met Kaelen's greatsword head-on. Sparks burst with every clash, the force of each blow driving him backward across the altar steps. His arms burned, his shield splintered beneath the strain, and still the Hollow Knight pressed forward, relentless and unyielding. The shard flared in his grasp, threads of silver fire racing along his blade each time he swung. For an instant, the light would force Kaelen to recoil, his pale armor hissing where it touched the glow. But the reprieve never lasted. Shadows surged to smother the flame, and Kaelen advanced once more, inexorable as a tide. Lyanna fought with feral precision, her spear darting like a serpent's fawn. She struck at Kaelen's joints, his flanks, his back, always moving, always seeking weakness. Twice she forced him to turn, his great sword sweeping in wide arcs that shattered stone pillars rather than flesh. Each time, she barely slipped away, the wind of his blade tearing past her cheek. Aldren knelt by the altar, his voice cracking as he carved runes into the dust with his staff. "Hold him, Aldren," he cried. "I can bind him, but only if you keep the shard's light upon him." Kaelen's helm snapped toward the old scholar, sensing his intent. With a roar like grinding iron, he hurled a wave of shadows straight at Aldren. Aldren reacted without thought. He raised the shield, the shard burning white hot. The darkness broke against it like water against stone, splintering into 1,000 fragments of smoke. The impact drove him to his knees, but Aldren still lived. The Hollow Knight's voice rolled through the chamber. "You resist me at the cost of your flesh. Already your bones cracked beneath the shield's weight. How much longer before you beg for release?" Aldren staggered upright, sweat streaming down his face, his chest heaving. He could feel the shard's power gnawing at him, burning deeper with every heartbeat. Yet when he looked at Lyanna, still standing with her spear bloodied, and at Aldren, still clawing at the last of his strength to protect them, his resolve hardened like steel. "I'll stand until the mountain itself falls. Aldren spat. The shard pulsed at his words, not with pain, but with a fierce surge of light that rippled through the chamber. Silver runes blazed alife across the walls, the statues, even the floor beneath their feet. Kaelen staggered, his shadows faltering as if the mountain itself had turned against him. Aldren shouted, his voice echoing with sudden power. Now! Strike him now, Aldren! Aldren charged. His blade flared with silver flame, his shield radiant in his arm. For the first time, Kaelen raised his sword not to strike, but to defend. Their clash sent a shock wave through catacombs, stone cracking, dust raining from the ceiling. The two forces, shadow and silver, locked in a battle that neither could win in that moment. But the mountain groaned around them. The ancient ward strained to breaking. Cracks split the floor, and a deep rumble echoed through the catacombs. Lionel's eyes widened. The chamber won't hold. We'll be buried alive. Aldren forced the last of his strength into runes, hurling his staff toward the far wall. The stone split open, revealing a narrow passage beyond. Go! He shouted, his voice raw. Go now, before the mountain swallows us all. Aldren hesitated, still locked with Kaelen. Silver light clashing with shadow. He felt the hollow night's grip, like chains binding him. Kaelen's hollow voice whispered through the roar of stone and fire. Run, if you wish. You cannot escape me. The shield will find its way back to me, through your hands or through your grave. With a cry, Aldren tore free, stumbling back toward Lina and the opening Aldren had created. Together they fled into the collapsing passage as the catacomb chamber fell in upon itself, sealing Kaelen and his shadows in a storm of dust and stone. The mountain trembled, and then there was silence. The three of them stumbled to the narrow passage, choking on dust as the roar of collapsing stone faded behind them. Aldren leaned heavily on his shield, his every step weighted by exhaustion and the shard's relentless burn within his chest. The silver glow had dimmed to a faint ember, flickering weakly as though the shard itself shared in his fatigue. The tunnel twisted sharply downward, cut not by nature but by purposeful hands long dead. Smooth stone walls bore faded engravings, sigils of guardians long forgotten, etched with silver that still shimmered faintly despite the centuries. Their glow illuminated the path just enough for them to see one another's hollow-eyed faces. Lina broke the silence first. Her voice was hoarse but steady. If the mountain truly sealed Kaelen, then we've done what no one else could. She forced a grim smile, though her eyes betrayed the unease she carried. We should be celebrating. Aldren shook his head, clutching his side where blood had seeped through his robe. Do not be so quick to claim victory. You felt it, both of you. That was not his end. The Hollow Knight is bound to the shield. So long as the shard exists, so too will he. His gaze fell on Aldren, who bore the weight of the relic like a man carrying his own tombstone. Aldren didn't speak at first. He could still hear Kaelen's voice in his mind, echoing faintly, a whisper in the marrow of his bones. Through your hands or through your grave. He clenched his fists, forcing the words away. Then we must keep moving. If Kaelen survived, he'll hunt us. And if the shield has more secrets, we need answers before he finds them. The tunnel eventually opened into a cavern unlike any they had seen before. Its ceiling rose high overhead, glimmering with veins of silver that pulsed faintly, as if the mountain itself carried a heartbeat. In the center lay a stone dais, upon which rested a cracked shield, twin to the fragment Aldren carried. Though broken, its surface radiated an ancient power that made the air thrum around them. Lina's eyes widened. The Perisai Perik, the silver shield itself. Aldren staggered forward, breaking through his pain. No, not whole. Not anymore. This is but the husk. The fragments, like the one Aldren bears, must have been torn from it. The shield was shattered, perhaps to keep its power from falling into one man's hands. Aldren approached slowly. As he neared the dais, the shard in his arm vibrated, the silver glow brightening until it nearly blinded him. The fragment yearned to rejoin its origin, pulling him closer with every step. His knees shook beneath the weight of its call. He reached out. For a moment, he saw his reflection in the cracked silver, weary, battered, but alive. Then, in the shimmer, another figure loomed behind him. Kaelen's dark silhouette, standing as if the collapse had never touched him. Aldren staggered back, heart racing, but when he turned, there was nothing there, only shadows. Idrin's voice was sharp. Be careful. The shield may test you, or it may destroy you outright. Its power is no longer pure. Lyanna tightened her grip on her spear, scanning the cavern's edges. We're not alone here. The air grew colder. From the cracks in the cavern floor, tendrils of shadows seeped upward, writhing like smoke. A familiar voice whispered through the cavern, soft but full of venom. You cannot flee me. Where the shield rests, I will rise. Kaelin's presence flooded the chamber once more, not whole, not in flesh, but in spirit. His will clung to the relic, feeding on its fragments, and though buried in stone, his reach stretched far. The silver veins along the ceiling flared as if resisting his influence, but the ground trembled. The cavern was not a sanctuary. It was a battlefield. Aldren lifted his sword, the shard burning brighter now, as if daring Kaelin's presence. His voice was hoarse but unyielding. Then let the shield choose. If it holds your will, Kaelen, let's see if mine burns stronger. The cavern thrummed like a living heart, its silver veins glowing brighter as Aldren raised the shard high. A tremor swept through the stone dais, and the fractured remains of the silver shield stirred, pieces shifting as though called to life by the fragment's light. Lyanna planted her spear, steadying herself as the floor rippled beneath her boots. Aldren, whatever you're doing, make it fast. Idrin, clutching his staff for balance, cried out as runes blazed into being around the dais. They spiraled outward, weaving across the cavern walls in patterns too ancient for his weary eyes to fully comprehend. This is no simple relic. It is a seal. The shield was never meant to be wielded. It was meant to bind something. The shard in Aldren's hand pulsed violently, a rhythm that matched his racing heart. His vision blurred, silver light pouring into him until the cavern dissolved around him. He stood upon a battlefield of shadows, alone. Broken swords and shattered armor littered the ground, and above him the sky burned with black fire. Across the field, a lone figure strode forward, Kaelen, unbroken, his hollow armor gleaming like midnight steel. You feel it now, Kaelin's voice echoed, closer than it should have been. The shield remembers. It remembers me. It was forged to bind me, yet in its fragments I found my freedom. And in you, boy, I find the chain I will break. Aldren gritted his teeth, raising his sword. If the shield remembers, then let it also remember those who fought protected. I am not your chain, Kaelen. I am its bearer. Their blades clashed, not in flesh but in spirit. Sparks of silver and shadow tore across the battlefield, each strike echoing into the cavern, where Lyanna and Idrin watched Aldren convulse. Trapped in the shield's vision, Lyanna rushed forward, seizing his arm. He's burning alive. Idrin, do something. Idrin's voice cracked with fear and awe. I cannot pull him free. This is a shield's trial. If he fails, his soul will be consumed, and Kaelen will rise whole again through him. Inside the vision, Aldren felt his strength waning. Kaelin's shadow pressed down on him, relentless, inexhaustible. His arms trembled, his blade grew heavy, and for a moment he faltered. The weight of the shard threatened to pull him into the abyss. But then, through the blur of silver fire, he remembered Lyanna's steady eyes, Idrin's tireless wisdom, and the countless nameless guardians whose echoes seemed to watch in the broken field. He was not alone. He had never been alone. The shard blazed brighter, a torrent of silver fire erupting from its core. Aldren roared and drove his blade forward, not striking Kaelen, but thrusting into the ground itself. The battlefield shattered like glass, light flooding every shadow, until Kaelin's form dissolved with a cry of rage. Aldren gasped and felt his knees, the vision collapsing around him. He was back in the cavern, the shard in his hand glowing with steady light. The fractured shield on the dais pulsed once, twice, and then fell silent. Idrin's voice trembled. You resisted him. The shield acknowledges you, Aldren. For now. Lyanna knelt at his side, gripping his shoulder. You nearly died in there. Don't ever scare me like that again. But as Aldren raised his eyes to the cracked shield, he knew this was no victory. He could still hear Kaelin's voice, distant but unyielding. like a storm building on the horizon. This is not the end. You are but the vessel, and I am patient. The cavern shuddered one last time, dust falling from its ceiling. The trial was over, but the war for the Silver Shield had only just begun. The cavern lay quiet after the trial, its silver veins dimmed to a faint glow. Aldren sat slumped against the dais, every muscle trembling, his face pale as though the shard had burned away more than just his strength. Lyanna stayed close at his side, her hand gripping her spear, but her gaze fixed on him. Wary of the shadow she feared might still linger in his eyes. Aldren leaned heavily on his staff, his breathing ragged. Yet despite his fatigue, his mind was alight with revelation. "It is clear now," he murmured, his eyes never leaving the fractured remains of the shield. The Silver Shield was never simply a weapon. It was a prison, crafted to bind Kaelin's soul when steel and fire failed to end him. Lyanna frowned, brushing a streak of dust from her cheek. "And now that prison is broken." "Broken," Eden agreed, "but not undone. The fragments still carry their purpose. That is why Kaelen clings to them. Through them, he exists. Through them, he may one day be whole again." His gaze turned grim, and Aldren, as bearer of a shard, has become the battleground. Aldren forced himself upright, though his body protested with every movement. "Then what choice do I have? If the shield wants me as its vessel, then I'll use it to stop Kaelen before he can rise again." Lyanna shook her head fiercely. "That's no choice, it's a death sentence. Every time you wield it, you're burning yourself alive. If it kills you, Kaelen wins. There has to be another way." Edren's brow furrowed. "There may be." The shield's prison was forged with more than silver and steel. It was bound with knowledge, ancient words lost to time. If those rites still exist, they would be hidden in the codices of Merithil. The monastery ruins lie 2 days east of here, though few dare tread them. The monks guarded secrets meant never to be spoken aloud. Aldren's hand tightened on the shard, the silver glow faint but steady now. "Then that's where we'll go. If there's a way to sever Kaelen from this forever, I'll find it." Before Aldren could answer, the cavern trembled again. A deep, resonant crack split the air, and from the fissures along the walls poured whispers, not words, but countless voices speaking at once, as if the mountain itself held memory of every soul who had ever fallen to the shield. Aldren froze, the shard vibrating violently in his hand. The voices pressed against his mind, pleading, warning, cursing. He gritted his teeth, but one voice cut sharper than the rest, a whisper colder than ice. "You are mine, bearer. Every step you take is a step toward me." Kaelin's voice unmistakable. The shard burned white hot, forcing Aldren to drop it onto the stone floor. It skittered across the dais, still pulsing with light, as though mocking his weakness. Lyanna knelt beside him, her face set with determination. "Then we don't wait for him to come to us. We move now, before Kaelen gathers strength enough to walk free again." Aldren closed his eyes, his expression heavy with both dread and resolve. "Then to Merithil we go. But know this, the monastery does not yield its truths freely. What waits for us there may test you even more than Kaelen himself." Aldren retrieved the shard, the burn lingering in his hand. He met their eyes, his own hardened by the fire of determination. "Then let it test me. I'll endure whatever I must, because if Kaelen rises again, the world won't survive him." The three of them left the cavern behind, the mountain's whispers fading into silence, but the shard still throbbed in Aldren's grasp, a steady rhythm that matched his own heart, a reminder that the boundary between him and Kaelen was thinner than ever. And as they emerged into the pale light of dawn, far from the shattered catacombs, the wind carried with it a distant echo, Kaelin's laughter, low and patient, promising that the true battle had yet to begin. The dawn was pale, shrouded in mist, when the three companions set out from the mountain's shadow. The path eastward wound through a land that bore the scars of centuries, villages abandoned to ivy and rot, bridges crumbling into silent rivers, forests whose trees twisted unnaturally as though recoiling from some unseen hand. Aldren marched at the front, his shield strapped across his back, the shard pulsing faintly at his side. Every beat was like a reminder of the trial he had endured, and of the whisper that had followed him since. Sometimes it was silent, letting him breathe, but at odd moments, when his mind drifted, when his guard faltered, Kaelin's voice stirred again. One step closer, vessel. Every road ends with me. He said nothing of it to Lyanna or Aldren, though the shadows beneath his eyes betrayed his unrest. Lyanna walked a pace behind him, her spear resting on her shoulder. She kept her gaze sharp, scanning the edges of the trail for movement. Once or twice she thought she glimpsed something, a figure watching from the tree line, a flicker of armor in the distance. But when she turned, there was only empty mist. Still, her knuckles tightened around her weapon. "We're being followed," she muttered under her breath. Aldren, leaning heavily on his staff, looked older with every mile, yet his eyes gleamed with a scholar's fire as he spoke of Merithil. The monks were said to have bound their knowledge in living stone, he explained as they walked. Walls that remember, halls that whisper to those who enter. If the codices remain, they will not be found in books, but carved into bones of the monastery itself. "Sounds welcoming," Lyanna replied dryly. They camped that night in the shelter of a broken watchtower. The stars were smothered by clouds, the firelight throwing long, uneasy shadows across the ruins. Aldren sat apart from the others, staring into the shard's glow. His reflection in its silver surface seemed warped, his own eyes darker, his expression colder. When Lyanna came to sit beside him, she noticed his clenched jaw, the tremor in his hands. "You can't keep this from us," she said softly. "He's speaking to you, isn't he?" Aldren hesitated, then nodded. "He never stops. It's not just words. It's like he's waiting for me to slip, like he's already inside, testing every crack in my mind." He looked at her, his voice low. "I don't know how long I can keep him out." Lyanna's hand rested on his forearm, steady and strong. "Then we'll keep him out together. Don't carry this alone, Aldren. That's what he wants." Aldren stirred the fire, his weary eyes catching theirs. She is right. Kaelin's strength lies in solitude, in the silence where fear festers. So long as you remember you are not alone, Aldren, he cannot claim you fully. Before Aldren could reply, the night itself shifted. The mist thickened, and from beyond the fire came the sound of metal scraping stone. The three leapt to their feet, weapons ready. Out of the fog emerged shapes, armor-clad figures, hollow-eyed and moving with unnatural precision. Their blades gleamed dully in the firelight. Lyanna's face hardened. Grave-born. Aldren's voice shook with both fear and recognition. Kaelin's will stretch as farther than I fear. He raises warriors even here. The first of the hollow soldiers stepped into the circle of firelight, its face nothing but shadow behind a dented helm. It lifted its sword in eerie silence. Aldren raised his shield, the shard blazing brighter in his hand. Then let's show him we're not afraid. The night erupted into battle, steel ringing through the ruins as Kaelin's Graveborn closed in. The Graveborn struck as one, their blades falling in a rhythm too precise to be natural. Aldren caught the first blow on his shield, the impact rattling through his bones, and countered with a swift slash of his sword. The shard in his gauntlet pulsed, sending silver fire across the edge of his blade. The Graveborn shrieked, a hollow, tearing sound, as the light burned through its armor, reducing it to ash. But for each that fell, two more pressed forward. Their empty helms gleamed in the firelight, their movements unerring, as though guided by a single will. Lyanna darted through their ranks like a storm, her spear flashing in arcs of deadly precision. Each thrust struck at joints, each sweep tore one hollow knife from its stance. Still, she knew she was fending off not mere warriors, but Kaelin's echo, his will wearing corpses like armor. "Behind you!" she shouted, lunging to drive her spear through a Graveborn that had raised its blade at Aldren's unguarded side. Aldren, standing by the fire, carved glowing runes in the air with his staff. His voice shook but held firm, weaving a chant of binding. Blue flame leapt from the staff's tip, searing across three of the Graveborn at once. They staggered, their forms flickering like smoke, but they did not fall. "Their tether is too strong," he cried. "It is Kaelen himself who holds them together. The shard, Aldren, only its light can end them fully." Aldren fought like a man trapped between fury and fear. Every strike he made with the shard's silver glow shredded to the Graveborn, but each flare of light burned deeper into his arm. His muscles screamed, his breath came ragged, yet he pressed on, refusing to yield. The Grey-born closed around him, their swords hammering his shield in a relentless storm. His knees buckled. He could hear Kaelin's whisper even through the clash of steel. Feel it, vessel. Every strike you land, every ounce of shield you draw upon, it binds you closer to me. You cannot win without me. For a moment, Aldren faltered, his vision blurred. The voices pressing harder, urging him to surrender. His arm lowered, the shard's light flickering weakly. Then, Lyanna's voice pierced through the haze. Aldren, look at me. He lifted his eyes. Through the chaos, he saw her, still standing, still fighting, her face streaked with blood and grit, but her gaze fierce and unwavering. You're stronger than him. Prove it. Something inside him steadied. Aldren roared and drove the shard into the ground. A shockwave of silver fire burst outward, flooding the ruins in a wave of blinding light. The Grey-born shrieked as the light seared through them, their forms unraveling into smoke that the wind carried away. When the glow faded, the ruins lay silent. The last of the Grey-born crumbled into dust at Aldren's feet. He dropped to one knee, his chest heaving, sweat and blood streaking his face. The shard's glow dimmed once more, but its heat lingered, a constant reminder of what he had unleashed. Edren stumbled forward, gripping Aldren's shoulder. You must be careful. Every time you draw upon the shard so deeply, it feeds Kaelen as much as it weakens him. This war is not won by brute force. It must be won with knowledge. Lyanna knelt beside them, planting her spear into the earth. She touched Aldren's scarred hand, her eyes soft despite the harshness of the night. You saved us. Don't forget that. Aldren nodded, though his gaze was distant, for in the silence that followed, Kaelin's voice whispered once more, faint and cold. Every victory you claim is mine as well. Keep fighting, vessel, and soon you won't know where I end and you begin. The fire crackled, the mist thickened, and the three companions realized with chilling certainty. Kaelin's reach was growing faster than they had feared. The battle's ashes clung to them long after the Grey-born were gone. The fire sputtered low in the ruined tower, shadows leaning long and thin across the broken walls. None of them slept that night. Every creak of stone, every sigh of wind carried with it the memory of Kaelin's voice. When dawn came, it was veiled in gray. They broke camp quickly, their silence heavy with unspoken fears, and pressed eastward toward the monastery ruins. The land itself seemed to mirror their struggle. Trees twisted as though writhing in pain, their bark blackened with veins of shadow. Once clear streams had turned sluggish, their waters darkened as if ink had seeped into them. Villages they passed stood deserted, doors hanging open, hearts cold, as though their inhabitants had fled in haste. At one such village, Aldren paused before a shrine toppled into the mud. The carved figure had been defaced, its stone features scratched away until only a hollow face remained. His hand went to shard at his belt, and at once the air grew colder. Don't linger, Lyanna warned, her spear already poised. This place reeks of him. Edren's gaze swept across the ruined homes, his lips pressed in. Kaelin's corruption spreads faster than I feared. The shield's fragments are like cracks in a dam. Through them his will leaks, poisoning everything it touches. They pressed on, yet the journey grew more treacherous. At night, distant cries echoed from the hills, sometimes human, sometimes not. Once, as they crossed a ridge, they saw a field below littered with broken armor and shattered weapons, though no bodies remained, as if the earth itself had swallowed the fallen whole. On the third evening, the storm gathered. Rain fell in sheets, drumming against their cloaks as lightning illuminated the horizon. In that flash, Aldren glimpsed something. The outline of a vast structure, broken but still standing, its towers jagged against the sky. The monastery, Edren said, his voice hushed despite the thunder. Marathil, they descended through the rain-slick paths, each step heavy with anticipation. The monastery loomed larger with every flash of lightning. Its walls cracked, its windows hollow, but strange glow leaked from its stones, as though the building itself breathed faint light. By the time they reached the gates, night had fallen fully. The storm raged around them, But within the ruins it was only silence. The iron gates hung half-broken, their bars twisted into unnatural shapes. Lyanna gripped her spear, her voice barely above a whisper. "It doesn't look abandoned." Aldren stepped forward, the shard at his side pulsing with a rhythm that matched the glow in the walls. His jaw tightened. "No, it's waiting." Idrin's eyes shone with both fear and wonder as he traced the carvings along the gate. The patterns shifted subtly, as though alive, as though watching. "The monastery remembers," he murmured. "It has been waiting for us." The storm howled. The gates groaned on their hinges, and with a shove, Aldren forced them open. The sound echoed through the hollow halls beyond like a drumbeat. As they crossed the threshold, the faint glow along the walls brightened and whispers stirred in the air. Not Kaelin's voice this time, but a chorus of countless others. Some pleaded, some warned, some wept, but all of them spoke of the same thing, the shield. And deeper within, beyond the shadowed halls, something stirred awake. The air inside Merathil's monastery was heavy, as though every breath drew centuries of dust into their lungs. Their footsteps echoed faintly on stone worn smooth by generations of long-dead monks. The glow from the walls ebbed and swelled like the pulse of a great heart, and the whispers that haunted them grew louder with each step. Aldren tightened his grip on the shard at his belt. It thrummed steadily, pulling him deeper into the ruins. The others followed, but unease weighed on their movements. Lyanna's spear never lowered, her eyes flicking to every shadow, every alcove. Aldren moved slower, reverent, tracing his fingers along the walls as if touching a memory. "They prayed here," he murmured, "but not to the gods we know." Their faith was in the shield itself, in the light it carried. This place was alive with it once. Now, it was alive with something else. They entered what had once been the central nave. The ceiling stretched high into the dark. Arches cracked but still magnificent. Statues stood in rows, their faces worn smooth, hands outstretched as if in supplication. At the far end of the nave rose the remnants of an altar, its surface scorched and blackened. As they drew near, the whispers condensed into a single voice. "You who carry the shard, do you seek salvation or doom?" The question struck them all at once, not through their ears but inside their skulls. Aldren staggered, clutching his temples. Lyanna spun, spear ready, but there was no enemy in sight, only the statues watching. "It speaks to us," Aldren said through gritted teeth, sweat beading his brow. "The shield is not gone. It remembers, but it tests those who seek its secrets." The altar cracked with a sharp report, fissures spreading across its blackened surface. From within, light poured, shaping itself into 3 distinct paths radiating outward across the nave. Each path shimmered with a different hue, one of blinding silver, one of burning crimson, and one of deep, unsettling shadow. "The codices," Aldren whispered, while flooding his voice. "The knowledge of the shield's making is hidden within trials. Each color is a path, a truth we must face." Lyanna's eyes narrowed at the crimson glow. "It feels like blood, like war." "The silver," Aldren muttered, staring into its light. "It pulls at me." The shadowed path pulsed faintly, colder than the others, as though it whispered a promise meant for ears alone. Before they could decide, the statue stirred. Stone cracked, dust fell, and slowly the figures raised their arms. Their eyeless faces turned toward the companions, and in unison, their mouths opened in a hollow chant. The glow of the paths flared brighter. The monastery was not offering them a choice. It was demanding one. Lyanna lifted her spear. "Well, Aldren, which truth do we face first?" Aldren's hand hovered above the shard at his side, its silver light pulsing in rhythm with the path of light before them. He felt it deep in his chest, an insistent tug, like the beat of his own heart calling him forward. "The silver," he said finally, his voice low but steady. "It's meant for us. For me." Lyanna gave him a sharp look. "Or it's meant to lead you straight into Kaelin's grasp. Don't mistake temptation for destiny." But Aldren was already nodding, his scholar's eyes alight with feverish understanding. "No, this path will test the shield bearer. It was always said the silver path reveals not only strength of arm, but strength of spirit. If we are to learn the first truth of the codices, Aldren must walk it. The statue's chanting grew louder, their stone fingers pointing toward the silver-lit archway. The decision was no longer theirs to delay. Aldren stepped forward, and the path stretched endlessly into white brilliance. The air grew colder, thinner, until the monastery around them dissolved. They found themselves on a vast plain of polished stone, as though standing atop a mirror that reflected nothing but the blinding sky above. In the distance, a lone figure stood, armored in silver, a shield strapped to his back. The man turned, and Aldren's breath caught. It was himself, or rather, what he might become, an older, battle-worn version. His face marked with scars, his eyes hardened like steel. This future Aldren carried the silver shield hold, gleaming with a radiance so fierce it hurt to look upon. "You seek the shield," the doppelganger said, voice echoing like thunder. "But are you prepared to bear its weight? To bind yourself to its will, even if it demands everything?" The real Aldren squared his shoulders, though unease churned in his gut. "I'll carry it if it means ending Kaelen's darkness." The other Aldren raised a shield, and its light intensified until the ground trembled beneath them. "Then prove it. Show me your resolve." Without warning, he charged. The clash rang like a bell through the mirrored plain. Steel met steel, sparks scattering in the air. Aldren was thrown back by the sheer force of the blow, his arms rattling from the impact. Lyanna rushed forward, but the instant she tried to cross the silver boundary, an unseen barrier hurled her back. "Aldren!" she shouted, fists slamming against the invisible wall. "You fight alone." Edren's face paled. The trial was never for us. He must conquer himself or fall. Inside the circle of silver light, Aldren forced himself back to his feet. His double stood waiting, shield raised, eyes unblinking. The trial had begun. The mirrored plane stretched infinitely, swallowing sound and distance alike. Aldren faced a silver-clad double, who stood immovable, the shield glowed with an intensity that pierced the false sky above. "You are unworthy," the reflection said flatly, as though declaring a simple truth. "You doubt yourself. You fear what you will become. Such fear will break the shield long before Kaelen does." "I've faced worse than fear," Aldren spat, lifting his sword, "and I'm still standing." He charged. His blade struck, sparks showering the air, but his double absorbed the blow effortlessly, shield angled with perfect precision. The force sent Aldren reeling backward. Before he could recover, the doppelganger advanced, each step resounding like thunder. The shield slammed into him like a wall of iron. Aldren staggered, ribs aching, but he did not fall. "You claim to fight for others," the reflection pressed, voice echoing. "But in truth you fight to escape your father's shadow, to prove you are not his failure. Tell me, Aldren, when you wield the shield, will it be for your people or for your pride?" The words cut sharper than any blade. He saw his father's face, stern and disappointed, the memory of expectations unmet. He clenched his teeth, gripping his sword tighter. "I fight to protect them all. That's the truth." The reflection's eyes narrowed. "Prove it." The silver-clad Aldren surged forward again, faster this time, forcing Aldren into a desperate defense. Steel rang, muscles burned, every strike heavier than the last. Aldren's knees buckled as his double drove him backward across the plain. Outside the silver barrier, Lyanna's fist pounded against the unseen wall. "Damn it, he's not strong enough." Her voice cracked with fury. Edren's eyes flickered with unease as he studied the runes glowing across the barrier. This isn't about strength. The shield doesn't measure his sword arm. It measures his heart. If he fights for pride, he will fall. If he fights for them, he might yet endure. Inside, Aldren gasped as the sword was wrenched from his grip, skidding across the mirrored surface. His double raised the shield high, its light flaring like a second sun. "Choose, Aldren," the reflection intoned. "Rise as shield bearer, or fall as your father's son." The radiant shield descended, and in that blinding instant, Aldren's hand reached not for his blade, but for the shard at his side. Its silver glow surged, meeting the strike head-on. The impact exploded in light, hurling both figures apart. When Aldren staggered upright, his reflection was watching him, not with contempt, but with the faintest trace of approval. The double lowered its shield, the light dimming. "You may yet be worthy," it said, and then, like glass shattering, it dissolved into a storm of silver motes, which flowed into Aldren's shard. The plane cracked and vanished, and the companions were thrown back into the monastery's nave. The barrier fell. Lionel caught Aldren as he stumbled, his breath ragged. The shard of his belt gleamed brighter now, runes swirling faintly across its surface. Aldren's voice trembled with awe. The first codex, he has passed the silver path. But before relief could settle, the crimson-lit passage flared, its glow flooding the nave like fire. The monastery was far from finished with them. The light from the crimson path spilled across the nave like a flood of molten steel. It painted the cracked walls in hues of blood and flame, and the chanting of the statues deepened into a low, warlike rhythm, like the beating of war drums in the distance. Lioness stiffened, her grip tightening around her spear. She knew, even before Aldren whispered it aloud, "The crimson path is yours." Her jaw clenched. Figures, always a bloody one. The path widened before her, a corridor of fire leading into shadow. The others could only watch as the unseen force pulled her forward, separating her from them. Aldren reached for her arm, but the barrier rose again, and she vanished into the light. The monastery dissolved, and Lionel found herself standing on a battlefield that stretched without end. The ground was scarred with trenches, the air thick with smoke, and in the distance, armies clashed beneath a burning sky. At first, it was only noise, clashing steel, screams, the roar of fire. But soon she recognized them, the voices of comrades, brothers in arms, people she had once fought beside. And then she saw them, fallen warriors, clad in familiar armor, rose from the ash. Faces she had known, captains, friends, even her younger brother, turned toward her with eyes hollow and accusing. "You left us," one cried, blood staining his lips. "You chose survival over loyalty," another hissed. "You abandoned me," her brother's voice thundered, shaking the sky itself. Lionel's heart hammered in her chest. She raised her spear in defiance, though her grip trembled. "I did what I had to. I fought until the last. Don't you dare accuse me." The chorus of voices drowned her out, a wall of fury and betrayal. The battlefield surged with the shades of the fallen, closing around her, weapons gleaming with spectral fire. Her brother stepped forward, taller than she remembered, his eyes like molten iron. He bore no weapon, only the weight of his gaze. "Tell me, Lionel," he said, voice calm but edged with sorrow. "When you fight now, do you fight for us or only to soothe your guilt?" The words cut deeper than any blade. She staggered back, her spear wavering. For years, she had driven herself harder than any soldier, never faltering, never retreating. But in the quiet moments, in the cracks of her armor, she had heard their voices. The dead she could not save. "No!" she whispered, shaking her head. "I don't fight for guilt." She forced her stance firm, her eyes burning with defiance. "I fight so no one else will have to die like you did." The battlefield stilled. The shades hesitated, their forms flickering like smoke in the wind. Her brother's stern expression softened, and for a moment, his eyes were his own again. Then fight Lionel, not as a weapon of vengeance, but as a shield for the living. The shades shattered like glass in a storm. The battlefield dissolved into crimson light, which surged into her spear. Runes burned across the steel, glowing faintly, as though the weapon itself had been remade. Lionel stumbled back into the monastery nave, her face pale, sweat streaking her brow. The crimson light faded, leaving only the faint shimmer along her weapon. Aldren stepped forward, his voice reverent. "The second codex answers through her. The crimson path is past." Before Aldren could speak, the shadows at the far end of the nave stirred. The third path, the dark one, pulsed faintly, a low and dreadful heartbeat. And in the silence that followed, another voice cut through the air. Not the monastery's. Kaelen's. "You dare touch what is mine." The entire nave trembled as his presence brushed against them, vast and suffocating. The monastery's nave shook as Kaelen's voice rolled through it, each syllable dripping with malice. The shadows along the walls writhed like living things, reaching upward until they blotted out the faint silver glow. Aldren's shard flared in defiance, but its light seemed small, fragile, before that encroaching darkness. Lyanna planted her spear in the stone, her breath ragged from her trial, while Aldren staggered backward, his face pale with terror. "He should not be able to reach us here," Aldren gasped, clutching the runes carved along the nave's edge. "The monastery is sanctified, bound by the codices. He must be forcing himself through the shadow path." The path of darkness pulsed in time with Kaelin's words, each beat echoing like a heartbeat inside their skulls. "You cannot hide in ruins. The shield will return to me, whether through your blood or your surrender." With a thunderous crack, the floor split open. Black fire surged upward, and from emerged twisted forms, grave-born, their hollow eyes glowing with sickly light. They spilled into the nave, weapons screeching against stone as they advanced. "Tests or not, we don't have a choice," Lyanna snarled, spinning her spear to meet the first rushing foe. "We fight!" The clash erupted instantly. Lyanna's spear pierced through a grave-born's chest, scattering it into ash. Aldren's blade sang as he cleaved another in two, the shard of his belt blazing with every strike. But for each foe they cut down, two more surged from the dark. Aldren raised his staff, chanting words of old power, runes spiraling out to form a ward around them. "It's not enough," he shouted above the chaos. "The shadow path must be faced. Its trial will end this incursion." Aldren drove his sword into another grave-born, its screech echoing in his ears. "Then who takes it? Me?" Lyanna's trial nearly broke her. Before either could answer, the darkness coalesced at the far end of the nave. A figure stepped forth, cloaked in shadow, its features shifting and indistinct. Its voice, however, was unmistakable. Kaelen, or rather, a fragment of him, a projection forced into the monastery to the path of shadow. The air grew thick, suffocating. His presence pressed against their minds, cold and poisonous. The grave-born fell silent, bowing as one to the phantom. Kaelin's hollow gaze fixed on Aldren. "It should be you. The shadow is yours to walk, just as the shield will be yours to shatter." The phantom raised its hand, and the shadows surged toward Aldren like a tide, wrapping around his arms and legs. Lyanna lunged to cut them away, but her blade passed through harmlessly. "Stop," she cried, voice breaking. "Take me instead." But the phantom only laughed, a sound like a grave cracking open. "No, warrior. The Crimson has already claimed you. The shadow wants only him." Aldren's ward faltered, sparks scattering as the phantom's power pressed harder. "Aldren!" he shouted, desperation lacing his voice. "The trial is not Kaelin's trap. It's the monastery's weapon. If you resist, you'll be consumed. But if you face it, you might turn it against him." The shadows pulled harder, dragging Aldren toward a yawning black corridor. His shard blazed wildly at his side, as though resisting, as though crying out. Aldren met Lyanna's frantic eyes, then Aldren's pale, terrified face. His jaw set. "Then I'll face it," he said through gritted teeth. "Whatever waits in that darkness, it ends with me." The shadows swallowed him whole. The last thing he heard before the world dissolved was Kaelin's voice, cold and triumphant. "Welcome, air failure. Let us see what you truly fear." Darkness swallowed Aldren whole. There was no ground beneath his feet, no sky above his head. Only an endless void that pressed close against his skin, thick and suffocating. He stumbled, his sword and shard still clutched tight, though both seemed dimmed here, their glow devoured by the shadows. Then a voice rose from the black, deep and venomous. "You fear what you are destined to become." The void rippled, and Kaelen emerged, not the phantom form from the monastery, but whole, towering, his silver armor blackened and warped, his eyes burning with malice. The silver shield hung on his arm, but it was broken, cracked down the center, bleeding light like a wounded heart. Aldren raised his sword, forcing his breath steady. "You're not real. Just another trial. I'll cut through you like the rest." Kaelin's laughter shook the void. "Am I not? This path shows truth, not lies. You will not fight me. Aldren, you will fight yourself." The shadows surged and coiled, forming shapes around Kaelen. Faces flickered in the dark. Aldren's father, his fellow knights, villagers he could not save. All of them turned hollow eyes toward him. "You were never enough," his father's voice thundered. "Not the son I wanted. Not the knight the realm needed. You failed us," whispered the villagers. "You carried the shard, but not the strength to protect us." The chorus grew louder, deafening. The weight of every failure Aldren had buried clawed its way to the surface. His grip on his sword faltered. Kaelen stepped closer, his massive frame blotting out what little light remained. "When the shield shatters, it will not be by my hand. It will be by yours. Because in the end, Aldren, you crave its power as much as I do. You will take it, wield it, and be broken by it." The words dug deep, sharper than any blade. Aldren fell to one knee, the shadows pulling at his arms, his chest, his very heart. For a terrible moment, he believed them. Meanwhile, outside the trial, Lyanna and Aldren stood in the nave, the phantom of Kaelen looming above them, the grave-born pressing on all sides. Lyanna's spear cut another down, but her eyes kept flicking to black corridor where Aldren had vanished. "He's been in too long," she shouted, desperation cracking her voice. Aldren's runes flared as he cast another ward to hold back the phantom's reach. "No, we must trust him. The shadow path is his to walk. If we break it, we doom him." The phantom smiled, shadows bleeding from its form. "He is already mine. You feel it, don't you?" His will falters. His heart fails. "Soon, you will fight not beside him, but against him." Lyanna roared, her spear piercing through two grave-born at once. "You're wrong. He'll never fall to you." But even as she spoke, a sliver of fear twisted in her chest. Within the void, Aldren trembled beneath the crushing weight of failure. The voices clawed at him, his father's condemnation echoing endlessly. Then, faint and fragile, another voice stirred within him. Not Kaelin's, not the shadows. Lyanna's. You'll never fall to him. Aldren's breath shuddered. Slowly, his fingers tightened around the shard at his belt. Its light flickered weakly, but it was still there, stubborn, defiant. He forced himself to stand, his knees shaking but unyielding. His gaze locked on Kaelin's towering form. "I am not my father's failure," he said, his voice raw but steady. "I am not your pawn. I fight because others still live, and I'll see the shield whole, no matter the cost." The shard blazed, light exploding outward, shredding the shadows that bound him. Kaelen snarled as cracks spread across his false form. The trial was not over, but Aldren had chosen to rise. The void shook as Aldren's shard ignited, its silver light cutting through the black. For the first time, the shadows recoiled as though burned. Kaelin's towering figure snarled, cracks of light splitting across his armor. "Defiance does not change the truth," the false Kaelen hissed. "You are weak. You will break. And when you do, I will claim not just the shield, but you." He surged forward, broken shield raised, and the impact of the clash rattled the endless void. Aldren's sword met the darkened shield, sparks of silver and shadow scattering like stars torn from the sky. The duel began. Kaelin's blows fell like thunder, each strike fueled by the weight of Aldren's doubts. His arm buckled, his shoulders screamed with pain, but the shard pulsed in his grasp, infusing him with a rhythm that steadied his strikes. "You don't wield me," Aldren growled between gritted teeth. "You haunt me, but you're not the truth. You're the chain I've broken." He drove his blade forward, light exploding as it met Kaelin's chest. The phantom staggered, bellowing in rage, but the void itself twisted, rallying to Kaelin's call. The faces of the dead returned, screaming, pulling at Aldren's arms and legs. For every strike he landed, the shadows clawed deeper. His will was stretched to its edge. In the monastery nave, Lyanna and Aldren fought desperately against the phantom's endless grave-born. Each time one fell, another rose from the shadow. The phantom itself loomed above them, its form flickering as though tied to Aldren's battle in the void. Aldren's voice strained as he cast another rune circle, holding the phantom at bay for a moment. He's fighting Kaelen inside. That phantom weakens every time he resists, but if he falters... Lyanna cut down another grave-born, blood running from a gash on her arm. "Then we don't let him falter," she snarled. Her voice carried into the black corridor. "Aldren, don't you dare stop fighting. We need you. Her words pierced the void. Aldren heard them, faint but unyielding, and for a heartbeat, the shadows loosened. He roared, tearing free from the grasping hands, and lunged at Kaelen's phantom. His sword blazed as he struck again and again, each blow driving cracks deeper into the figure. Kaelen's voice broke into fury. No, you are mine. With one final surge, Aldren plunged his blade into the phantom's chest. The shard flared like a star, light flooding the void, until every shadow screamed and dissolved. The false Kaelen shattered into fragments of darkness, which scattered like ash in the wind. And then silence. The void dissolved, and Aldren stumbled forward into the monastery nave. He collapsed to one knee, gasping, the shard at his side glowing brighter than ever before, its runes now fully awakened. The grave-born crumbled into dust. The phantom Kaelen let out a last, furious howl before its form unraveled into nothingness. The nave was left in silence, broken only by the companions' ragged breaths. Aldren dropped his staff, staring in awe. The shadow path conquered. He has earned the third codex. Lyanna knelt by Aldren, gripping his shoulder. For once, her stern eyes softened. Don't you ever vanish on us like that again. But even as relief washed over them, Aldren's shard pulsed one final time, and deep within the monastery, something vast and ancient stirred, as though awakened by the completion of all three trials. The shield was no longer just a secret. It was calling. The monastery lay in silence after the phantom's destruction. Dust drifted down from the high arches, and the torchlight seemed to burn brighter, freer, as though the building itself had been released from centuries of oppression. Yet none of the companions spoke immediately. They were listening to the strange hum that now pulsed through the stones, a rhythm that resonated with the shard at Aldren's side. It was not just sound, but a call. Aldren's old eyes gleamed with something close to awe. The codices are no longer separate. They converge. The shield stirs. He raised the staff and traced runes in the air, revealing faint patterns of silver fire glowing along the floor and walls. Ancient inscriptions that had been invisible for centuries now illuminated a path deeper into the monastery's heart. Lyanna frowned, her hand on her sword. Another trial? Not a trial, Aldren said softly. The shard in his grasp trembled, almost alive. A summons. They followed the glowing inscriptions, winding through hidden corridors until they reached a massive stone door bound in rusted silver bands. It bore no handle, only a central indentation shaped like the shard itself. Aldren hesitated, the weight of countless steps pressing upon him. The shard was warm, thrumming in time with his heartbeat. He thought of Kaelen, the phantom, the doubts, the whispers of failure, and felt the same fear rise again. But Lyanna's voice cut through. You've come this far. Whatever lies beyond, we face it together. He nodded, pressed the shard into the indentation, and the door shuddered open. The chamber beyond was vast, a circular vault whose ceiling disappeared into shadow. At its center lay a pedestal of polished obsidian, upon which rested a shield unlike any they had seen. Silver, yet gleaming as though forged from starlight itself, etched with runes that shifted like living flame. The silver shield. As Aldren stepped forward, the chamber trembled. The shield lifted from the pedestal, hovering, its light intensifying until it bathed the companions in radiance. A voice, deep, ageless, echoed in their minds. Bearer of the codices, you have faced the path of stone, the trial of flames, and the shadow's veil. You are tempered, yet strength is not ownership. Will you bind yourself to me, not as master, but as guardian? Aldren fell to his knees, overwhelmed by the enormity of the moment. His doubts, his failures, all weighed against him. But he remembered Kaelen's laughter in the void, and Lyanna's unwavering faith, and Aldren's guiding wisdom. Slowly, he raised his head. I don't claim perfection, Aldren said, his voice raw. I am no flawless hero, but I will not turn away from those who need me. I will stand even when it breaks me. If you will have me, I will be your guardian. The shield flared, silver fire rushing into Aldren's shard, fusing them. A brilliant surge coursed through him, not power seized, but power entrusted. The silver shield lowered into his hands, and for the first time, Aldren felt whole, not haunted, but chosen. But the triumph lasted only moments. The chamber quaked violently as the shadows at the edges writhed and split. A cold wind swept through, carrying a voice that was all too familiar. At last, it rumbled, darkly triumphant. The shield is awakened, and now, so am I. From the rift stepped Kaelen, not phantom, but flesh and blood. His armor gleamed with corrupted silver, runes burning with violet fire. His eyes fixed on Aldren with recognition and hunger. The true enemy had come, and the final battle for the silver shield was about to begin. The rift widened as Kaelen stepped fully into the chamber, his boots grinding against the silver-lit floor. The glow of the shield clashed with the corruption radiating from his armor, the two lights snarling against each other like living foes. His presence filled the vault, a suffocating weight pressing down on every breath. Lyanna instinctively moved between Aldren and Kaelen, her sword raised. You're supposed to be dead. Kaelen's smile was cold. Death is a word for those without purpose. When I fell, when I was broken and left forgotten, the shield did not abandon me. It bound me. His gauntlet flexed, runes sparking across his corrupted armor. But I was not chosen as guardian. I was chained, and in chains I found truth. This relic you hold is no gift. It is a prison disguised as hope. Aldren's eyes narrowed, his voice taut with restrained fury. You let the codices twist you. Their shadows fed on your bitterness. You became their vessel, not their master. Kaelen's gaze lingered on Aldren, sharp as a blade. And you walk in my footsteps, but you will stumble where I rose. That shield was meant for me, and it remembers me. Do you truly believe it will choose a boy drowning in doubt over the night it first bound? Aldren's hand trembled on the silver shield. The weight of Kaelen's words threatened to drag him under. For so long, he had feared he was only chasing Kaelen's shadow, unworthy of the path he walked. Now, with Kaelen alive and claiming the shield as his by right, the doubt screamed louder than ever. But then Lyanna's voice cut through, fierce and unyielding. The shield didn't abandon you, Kaelen. You abandoned yourself. You let bitterness rot your oath. Aldren has faced his weakness and still stands. That's what makes him worthy. Kaelen's smile faltered, twisting into rage. Worthy? Then let us see. The vault trembled as Kaelen raised his corrupted blade, a massive greatsword veined with violet fire. Shadows surged at his command, forming spectral soldiers around him. The chamber darkened, as though the shield's light itself was being smothered. Aldren's shield flared in response, silver light pushing back the gloom. He rose to his feet, steadier now, the shield firm in his grasp. I don't need to be you, Kaelen. I don't need to be perfect. I just need to stand. The corrupted knight roared, charging forward. Lyanna met the first wave of shadow soldiers, her blade cutting through their forms like flame through parchment. Aldren raised runes of light, sealing cracks in the chamber as the two forces collided. At the heart of it all, Aldren and Kaelen clashed, silver shield against corrupted steel. The impact was cataclysmic, sending shockwaves through the vault. The battle for the shield had truly begun. The chamber became a storm of light and shadow. Every strike between Aldren and Kaelen reverberated like thunder, the silver shield blazing against the corrupted greatsword's violet fire. Sparks of silver and black rained across the vault, scorching the runes that lined the floor. Each blow was more than steel, it was conviction. Kaelen fought like a man possessed, every strike fueled by years of rage and betrayal. You were what was mine, he roared, his sword crashing down an arc that nearly split Aldren's arm from shoulder. You stand where I should stand. You breathe with a life I was denied. Aldren raised the shield, the impact driving him to his knees. The weight was crushing, but he refused to fall. You weren't denied, you surrendered. You let the darkness speak louder than your oath. He pushed upward, sparks of light bursting as the shield forced Kaelen back. I won't make that choice. Meanwhile, Lyanna fought at the edge of the chamber, blades flashing through shadow soldiers that reformed as quickly as they fell. Sweat drenched her brow, her breathing ragged, but her stance never wavered. You shadows are nothing compared to him, she snarled, cutting one down with a sweeping strike. But even she began to tire. The shadows press closer, their claws grazing her armor. Aldren, chanting from the rear, etched rune circles into ground, binding dozens of the wraiths in cages of fire and light. Yet for every circle completed, cracks of exhaustion spread across his face. His voice shook. Their strength mirrors Kaelin's. If Aldren falters, the army will never end. Lyanna's gaze flicked toward the duel, her teeth gritted. Then he cannot falter. At the chamber's center, the duel escalated. Kaelen struck like a storm, heavy, brutal, unrelenting. Aldren's arms screamed with strain, his shield dented from repeated blows. You think strength is defiance? Kaelen sneered, pressing forward. Strength is dominion. It is to bend others, relic people, fate itself, to your will. I learned that when the shield cast me aside. Aldren's breath was ragged, his legs buckling, but his eyes burned with something Kaelen lacked. Strength isn't bending the world. It's carrying it, even when it breaks you. He surged forward, his sword igniting with silver light, striking Kaelen across the chest. The corrupted knight staggered, growling, violet fire spilling from a wound. But instead of falling, Kaelen laughed, a sound like steel grinding on stone. Good. Show me. Let's see if your so-called strength can outlast mine. He raised his great sword, shadows coiling into its edge, and brought it down with the force of collapsing mountain. Aldren caught on the shield, the clash exploding with light and darkness, so fierce it shook the entire monastery. The fate of the shield and both knights hung in the balance. The clash between Aldren and Kaelen split the chamber with a deafening crack. Silver light and violet fire collided in a storm that threatened to tear the vault apart. The floor beneath them fractured, runes sparking wildly as the shield resisted Kaelin's corruption. Aldren's knees buckled. His shield arm shook violently, every muscle burning as Kaelen pressed down with relentless fury. The corrupted knight's laughter echoed through the chamber. See how easily the light falters? Even chosen guardians bleed. You are no savior. Aldren, you are fuel for the fire that will crown me. The shadows surged in answer, bolstering Kaelin's strength. They clawed at Aldren's ankles, climbing his legs like vines of living night. For every doubt in his heart, the grip tightened. He could feel the darkness seeping through the cracks in his spirit. His vision blurred. Kaelin's face twisted, shifting. Sometimes his enemy, sometimes the phantom he had slain, sometimes his own reflection sneering back at him. You are nothing but failure in a borrowed role, the voices whispered. Aldren cried out, the silver shield dimming under the weight of despair. At the chamber's edge, Lyanna carved a bloody path through the shadow army. Her blade blurred in arcs of steel and light, yet the tide never ceased. For every wraith she struck down, two rose in its place. Her armor was shredded, her breath ragged, but she refused to fall. Hold the line, Lyanna. Aldren gasped, sweat pouring as he forced another rune circle into being. His staff trembled in his grip. His lips cracked from overuse of spellcraft. Aldren's wavering. The shadows feed on him. If we cannot sever their link, Kaelen will consume him. Lyanna's eyes darted to the duel. She saw Aldren sinking, swallowed by darkness. Kaelen towering over him like a god of ruin, her gut twisted in fear. No, she snarled, cutting through another shadow with all the strength she had left. He doesn't fall. Not now. Not when it matters. She raised her voice, shouting across the chaos. Aldren, you are not alone. The shield chose you because you fight for others, not for yourself. So fight for us. The words struck through the storm of whispers. For a heartbeat, Aldren's vision cleared. Lyanna's voice ringing louder than the darkness. He remembered her shield at his side during the trials, her unwavering strength when he faltered. He remembered Aldren's patient wisdom, the trust placed in him when he trusted himself least. The shield pulsed, faint but alive, as if waiting for him to answer. Kaelen snarled, sensing the shift, and forced his blade down harder. Don't listen to them. Their faith is your weakness. Cast aside, and you'll have power enough to never fail again. But Aldren, straining against Kaelin's weight, whispered through bloodied lips, no, their faith is my strength. With a roar, he surged upward. Silver fire erupted from the shield, blasting apart the shadows clinging to him. The light seared Kaelen's blade, forcing him back in a shower of sparks. For the first time, Kaelen stumbled. The chamber trembled, runes blazing brighter, as though the shield itself exulted in Aldren's stand. The battle was not over, but for the first time, the tide had shifted. The monastery shook as though the mountains themselves were groaning. Dust rained from a vaulted ceiling. Cracks split the walls, and the silver runes across the chamber pulsed with blinding light. The silver shield had fully awakened, and its power tore against the corruption Kaelen carried. The two forces could not coexist. One would have to fall. Aldren rose to his feet, battered but unbroken, the shield blazing in his grasp. Across from him, Kaelen's form flickered, violet fire crawling like veins of poison through his armor. Yet the fallen knight's smile was feral. "So, the child finds his voice," Kaelen growled, hefting his corrupted greatsword. "But resolve without power is a candle in a storm. Let us see how long you burn." The chamber exploded as they clashed once more. The shield rang like a bell against the greatsword, each strike scattering silver light and violet flame. The ground split beneath their boots, shock waves tearing through the vault. Lyanna and Aldren fought desperately at the edges, the shadow army surging in chaotic waves. Lyanna's blade was red with ichor, her body trembling from exhaustion, yet her eyes stayed locked on Aldren. She could see the weight of every strike, every heartbeat, every breath. Aldren drew on the last of his strength, his staff blazing as he etched a rune of containment across the floor. "I can hold the shadows back no longer. Aldren must end this now, or the shield's awakening will consume us all." Aldren felt the truth in those words. The shield thrummed against his arm, not as a weapon, but as a heartbeat. It was alive, responding to his will, his choices. It had chosen him, not because he was flawless, but because he would carry the burden others could not. Kaelen swung his greatsword, a blow that could split stone, and Aldren raised the shield high. The impact flared with light, so bright it blinded them both. Aldren roared, channeling every doubt, every failure, every pain into defiance. The shield answered. Silver fire surged outward, engulfing Kaelen. The corrupted knight screamed as the light seared his armor, burning away the shadows that bound him. His great sword shattered, fragments dissolving into ash. But even as the corruption peeled away, Kaelen's eyes locked on Aldren, no longer hateful but sorrowful. For an instant, Aldren saw not the tyrant, but the knight he might have been. "You carried it where I could not," Kaelen whispered. His body crumbled to dust, violet flames snuffed out, leaving only silence. The chamber stilled. The shadows dissolved. The monastery ceased its trembling. In the center of the ruin, Aldren stood with a silver shield glowing softly in his grasp, its fire no longer violent but steady, like a star at rest. Lyanna stumbled to his side, a weary smile breaking across her bruised face. "You did it," she said. "By the gods, Aldren, you did it." Aldren approached, his staff dim, his body nearly spent, yet his eyes shining. The shield has not seen a true guardian in centuries, and now it has won. Aldren looked down at the shield, its runes pulsing in rhythm with his heart. He did not feel triumphant, nor exalted, only humbled. He was no longer haunted by Kaelen's shadow. He carried his own light. Outside the monastery, dawn broke over the mountains. The first sunlight in centuries touched the stones, gilding the ancient structure with warmth. Aldren, Lyanna, and Aldren stepped into the light, weary yet unbowed. The shield gleamed on Aldren's arm, its secret no longer hidden, its purpose no longer lost. The journey had cost him blood, fear, and loss. Yet the shield had chosen, not as a weapon of conquest, but as a promise that even in the darkest hour, there would always be one willing to stand. The guardian stand had begun. The mountains lay quiet, bathed in morning light. Birds returned to the air, their wings catching the golden sun, as though even nature exhaled after centuries of silence. Aldren stood at the monastery's edge, the silver shield resting against his arm. Its glow had softened, no longer a flare of battle, but a steady warmth, like a lantern in the dark. For the first time, he felt at peace, yet Aldren's words lingered. "The shield is not an ending, Aldren. It is a beginning. Every relic bears two stories, the one it tells and the one it calls forth. You are its guardian now, and that means others will come. Lyanna tightened the strap of her armor, her expression as sharp as ever. Then let them. If the world wants to test us, we'll be ready. Aldren smiled faintly, though his gaze drifted eastward, toward the horizon where storm clouds gathered far away. The shield pulsed in his grasp, as though sensing what lay beyond sight. Darkness would rise again. Enemies would come searching, as Kaelen once did, and Aldren would face them, not alone, but with companions who would walk the same fire. The dawn broke higher, scattering the last shadows of night. The legend of the Silver Shield had begun anew. How was my story today? Is your body feeling warm now? If you're interested in hearing more of my stories, come back to this spot while you rest after your long journey.